All right, thank you and welcome everyone to the 2022-23 Public Budget Webinar on Wednesday, March 2nd, 2022. The purpose of the budget webinar is to really give an overview of the RCSD budget, some of the priorities. We'll be talking about the strategic plan, the academic and the fiscal plan from the state monitor. You'll hear a little bit later from our superintendent and our state monitor as well. You'll hear from our CFO, some generalities around the budget and what to look for and expect. And then you'll also hear from Terry, our budget director, about some exciting changes in our budget this year. In addition, you'll learn a little bit more tonight about participatory budgeting. So it is with great honor that I am going to transition the mic to our superintendent to discuss district priorities, budgetary considerations, and the impact of the federal stimulus funds on the budget. Dr. Myers-Smalls.
Thank you, Vice President LeBron, and good evening, everyone. I have the opportunity to discuss our strategic priorities and some other elements relative to the budget development process. The Rochester City School District is guided by strategic plans, academic, as well as fiscal plans, and then finally corrective action plans for special education, bilingual education, as well as a consent decree. So as we developed the budget, developing the proposed budget for 22-23 with the strategic plan, our priorities included certainly the corrective action plan, as I just mentioned, for special education and bilingual education. We also, as a target and a benchmark on our strategic plan, we have that we need to increase the proficiency of our scholars in grades 3 through 8 on the New York State ELA and math assessments. Improving school accountability is another priority as we are working to move schools out of receivership, as well as schools that are in CSI or comprehensive support or TSI targeted support, because we want to increase the numbers of schools that are in good standing, and also fortifying social emotional supports for our scholars. As far as the academic plan, we have really focused on shifting from having an emphasis on the operational aspects of the district to focus on student outcomes. I mentioned that we're working on creating more schools that are in good standing, so turnaround strategies for our struggling schools. We want to do a better alignment of fortifying our resources to focus on academic priorities, certainly professional development for our staff, as well as feasibility and zone configuration, and finally, college, career, and civic readiness, which each public school district in the state of New York is held accountable for. As far as the fiscal plan and our district priorities, upgrading an antiquated financial management system, ensuring that Medicaid reimbursement is in alignment with the required expectations, upgrading our special education management system, and that helps to fulfill the areas that we are identified for the corrective action plan and the consent decree, and then also eradicating structural deficit through better budget practices. When we think about school spending, we can categorize spending in 5 main categories, and they are listed as instruction, employee benefits, transportation, operations, as well as staffing resources. And we know that even though we are now in in-person instruction, COVID-19 certainly continues to have an impact on our budget as it relates to those 5 categories of spending, particularly in the areas of operation and staffing resources. Let's talk about key considerations for budget development. We need to ensure that we have alignment and compliance with the strategic, academic, and fiscal plans. We also know that enrollment in the Rochester City School District has been declining over the past 10 years and continues to decline. We monitor those numbers. We monitor those numbers on a weekly basis. Charter school enrollment is continuing to increase with 3 new charter schools coming to the Rochester community starting in September of 2022. Continue to look at reduction in staff positions and our physical footprint. The MOE with the city will remain the same. We have a target and expectation that our contracts will not increase by more than 1.2%. That equipment expenditures will remain at current levels and supply expenditures would increase by 1%. Now let's talk about our fiscal progress related to CRSA, which is our federal dollars. This pie chart includes all CRSA funding for the Rochester City School District, both the already approved round 1 and round 2 expenditures that will be submitted. Some key takeaways: the largest amount of funding that you can see has been dedicated to student health and safety, reopening and COVID response at 33.2 million, providing a safe and healthy environment for all students, staff, and community members is certainly a top priority. Next, a significant portion of our funding has been reserved for the upgrading of the enterprise resource planning system, an activity directly aligned to the state monitor plan that will pay dividends for all parts of our district's ecosystem. Next slide is our ARP, or the American Rescue Plan. Some key takeaways: a relative small amount of the ARP funding was used for reopening because we dedicated the largest chunk of that aspect in our CRSA funds. Additionally, maximizing CRSA, it allowed us to maximize CRSA funds for these positions, and it allowed us to really focus on academics. You can see the largest portion at 26%, or 5.1 million, is satisfying the unfinished learning that occurred in our district for our scholars from elementary, middle, and high school. Spending a minimum of 20% on funds on unfinished learning is a priority reserve requirement from the federal government. And we know how important this is for our scholars in the Rochester City School District, so we have budgeted beyond the 20%. A similar amount of funding is planned to be used for rigorous academics and instruction. These funds will be used for a variety of purposes, from ensuring every classroom has the needed materials for instruction, professional learning focused on instructional transformation, to building new programs and pathways for all our scholars. Community collaboration includes almost 4.4 million in funding set aside specifically for school-based participatory budgeting processes. As part of this plan, schools will receive a chunk of funding for which the school community will be responsible for coming to consensus about how to spend. These totals include the school-based allocation request. District schools were provided with a total of $28 million to plan for their unique needs. And with that, I'll transition back to Vice President LeBron.
Thank you, Dr. Maria. I forgot to give 2 housekeeping items to the community watching. This is a budget webinar, and typically pre-COVID, we were hosting these in person and allowing the opportunity for the community to ask questions. And so tonight, if you are watching on Facebook Live or on YouTube Live, you can actually drop your questions in either of those chats, and we do have staff monitoring. And at the end of this presentation, they will pull your questions and we'll have some opportunity to answer those questions live tonight. Just keep in mind that this is, again, just an overview of our entire budget. We will have budget deliberations and a public hearing where folks can come in and also give input on the budget. So that's one. And two, you will not hear from other commissioners tonight, and other commissioners will not be allowed to ask questions here. We do have budget deliberations to actually go deep dive into our actual budget. And during budget deliberations, that is the opportunity for Board of Education members to ask questions. So tonight, if you as a community member are watching and have questions on any of the information being presented, please drop your questions in the Facebook or YouTube chat as we are live. And with that, I will turn it over to our CFO, Carlene Pierce, to start discussing what our budget overview in general looks like year to year.
Thank you so much, Vice President LeBron. So if we can go out to the next slide, there you go. Just want to let you know one more time how our historic flow of revenue typically looks. And so again, using the data from our 21-22 budget, we anticipate that the funding for 22-23 will be basically the same moving forward. So we're breaking it down. The superintendent had mentioned the MOE with the city. You'll see that at 12.1%. We obviously have our state aid in there. We're heavily dependent upon state aid. We have our federal money coming in, that coming in the form of grants. And then we also have other revenues, and that encompasses such things as appropriated fund balance, and then some other ancillary funds that we receive, such as tuition for adult education and that type of thing, interest income. So if we move to the next slide now, we do have our expenditure breakdown. Again, the greatest portion of our expenditures for RCSD reside within our compensation as well as benefits of our employees. When you take a look at that, that will be a trend that is going to continue as we move into the future. We fully anticipate that and are realizing that now as we look at the 22-23 budget. But then you'll also see the other areas mentioned on this slide where our expenditures reside. I want to make it known as well for both the revenues and the expenditures. Both of these slides represent the entire RCSD budget. And so it's not just the general fund. When we move through the budgeting process from here on out, in our budget season, we focus in on the general fund as that is our focal point for the approval for the Board of Education as well as approval by the city. And with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Dr. Shelley Jallow, our state monitor.
Good evening. Good evening. As stated before, I am the state monitor for Rochester City School District, and some of my responsibilities in that endeavor are to make sure that the district has a balanced budget that is consistent with not only the district long-term financial plan, but with the academic plan and the financial plan that has been developed in collaboration with the administration and myself. So that's one of the major responsibilities for this school year, the past school year, and future school years to come. I want to talk about a couple of important dates that we want the public to keep in mind. The first date of importance is March 1st. March 1st is the date in which the balanced budget and all the accompanying documents are to be submitted to the state monitor. On March 24th, there will be a business meeting where I will present my response or my reaction to the budget that was created by administration. I want to add another date in here that I see missing. On March 11th, the district is required to share their budget with state officials as well for their feedback and guidance. After March 24th, on March 31st, that's the deadline to provide the proposed budget and the state monitor findings. Any budget amendments to the public via the website will also have to be done by that date, which is the 31st of March. So instead of 3 dates, it's 4 dates to remember: the March 1st, March 11th, March 24th, and March 31st. So this will be our busiest month as it relates to budgets. Thank you. Okay, I'll do this slide as well. Steps in the process. Superintendent and district administration prepare the budget. That is taking place now. That is due March 1st, or was due March 1st to the state monitor. March 15th, the board receives the draft proposal March 15th, and that's when the superintendent and both superintendents will be presenting their budget proposals to the board. On the 24th of March, that's when I give a response to all the budgets that the district has finally come up with, and give my response to how well it aligns to academics, how well it aligns to the financial plan, how well it includes information around bilingual ed, how much does it include information about the consent decree, and about other major initiatives that we have in the district that the district is responsible for. And then finally, you see there are many dates where there are opportunities for deliberation and conversation about the 22-23 budget. You see those dates are in April. And then May 9th, there will be a special board meeting where RCSD board will be voting and deciding and hopefully approving the budget for forwarding to City Council. Next slide, please. Steps in the budget process. I don't know if they'd like me to do that, if they'd like the CFO to share it.
I can actually do it, Dr.
Okay.
Jallo, but thank you.
Sure.
I'll
No,
just
no
go ahead
problem.
and jump in, but I really truly appreciate you stepping up.
No
So
problem.
the next steps in the calendar, and we did get this date tentatively, and we will get it confirmed today from the Chair of Finance on the City Council end. There will be a Rochester City School District budget hearing with City Council that is done every year. This year, however, instead of that taking place in June, which is where historically has taken place, it will happen on May 31st. And then immediately after that meeting, we're going to have the joint council board public hearing. That is a city council hearing. And so for folks who are interested in having one last final say in the input of the budget before City Council votes on the RCSD budget, that will take place as well on Tuesday, May 31st. After that, City Council does their budget approval process, and that date is scheduled for Tuesday, June 14th at 7:30 p.m. Next slide. So up next, I'm going to turn it over to Terry, our budget director. And Terry, if you can introduce yourself, that'd be great. I'm going to transfer it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President. I am Terry Hassler, the Executive Director of Budget for RCSD, and tonight I'm going to, excuse me, I'm going to go through some of the changes we're going to have to the budget book this year. So it won't be the same thing that you've seen in the past. And so let's go through some of those changes now. First, on these slides, it does say section 1, 2, and so on. I know that everyone is used to having sections in the budget book in the past. I just want to let you know that we're not gonna have sections anymore. It's gonna be one flowing document that's going to be one concise, user-friendly document with information, similar information, all in one location. We're gonna start off the book with a similar section from before, budget at a glance. This is going to give you the district overview, the mission, vision, and the core beliefs of the district, our strategic objectives, and the budget foundations, the process we used to build the budget, and the administrative team went through to get to that final proposed budget at the end. Next slide, please. Then we're gonna go into what used to be called section 3. That this is gonna go into the overall appropriation summary and the estimated revenue summary. And what's gonna be different from last year is we are going to break up the appropriation summary by funds this time, so you can see the general fund standing by itself, special aid fund, the school lunch fund. They're all going to be separated out. If anybody's ever looked at one of our budget books before, they'll know that that appropriation summary in the beginning was in total. and we just want to make that easier to read. Another big change that you can see right here on the slide is the position summary. A lot of people like to refer to it as FTEs or full-time equivalents of how many positions we have in the budget. And those in the past have been scattered throughout the book. And we want to take those and consolidate that information and put it up in the front so any reader can see them in total and can know where the positions that we budgeted are located, what organization code they're under, whether it be a department or a school. Next slide, please. Then that's going to flow into the school management and school profiles. As you can see, a little example there on the window. This is going to be very similar to the school pages that we had in the books in the past. It's just a different little layout and an easier way to read the information and make it a little more user-friendly to absorb that kind of information. And then that's going to then move into the administration, management, and financial information. In our prior books, this would be what would be section 5 or the departments. This is going to be consolidated down to show the budgets for each department as a total line item of personnel for one line, non-personnel, or sometimes referred to as operating budgets for each department, and then it'll show each department's total budget. And so that part's going to be summarized a little bit more and not have as much graphs and narrative attached to it. Next slide. Thank you. And then that's going to flow into some district-wide expenditures that aren't necessarily attached to a department or a school. Examples would be our debt service, our district-wide non-program service budgets. That would be the transfer we do to the capital fund from the MOE, from the city, to maintain our buildings, employee benefits, things such as that. And then that will follow up with the required New York State report card. And that will be kind of a summary of our new budget book, consolidating that information so it's a little easy, user-friendly and easier to read.
Thank you, Terry, so much. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure that the community also would appreciate the time and effort that has gone into it from our finance team and everyone who has contributed to a more readable, digestible budget book moving forward. And so up next, I've talked about this at several board meetings, just very briefly, but this is the formal introduction to Balancing Act, which is a budget participatory tool that we are going to be launching. And in an effort to get folks familiarized with the tool, we hope to take this year to do some more engagement with the community and schools and our staff and our students. So look out for future dates as we move forward. But the tool is uploaded with our current 21-22 school year budget, which is the budget that we're technically living in, as you will, right now. So it does not have the new budget that we are going to be doing budget deliberations for, but the vision and the hope and the goal is that next year we can get both of them to merge, if you will, and have a participatory tool for an actual budget live as we go through the budget process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, and we have a short video for you all to watch.
Hello to our Rochester City School District students, families, staff, and community. I am joined by School Board Vice President Beatrice LeBron. We would like to share some information about a new online tool that our district is using to help you better understand our budget.
Thank you, Leslie. Rochester is joining other school districts and local governments across the country and partnering with a company called Balancing Act, creators of a participatory budgeting simulation tool that will help inform our decision-making process by allowing the community to provide feedback about our budget process. So once in Balancing Act, you will see a simple breakdown of revenue and spending in the district, including funding we receive from federal, state, and local government. In almost every area of this tool, you are able to provide your input on how the district should allocate more or less resources, all while keeping the numbers within balance. To help you begin navigating Balancing Act, numbers from the current school year budget are available for your review. Even though we are in the process of developing next year's school budget, our goal is for you and the entire community to use this tool to better understand our budget process and improve transparency about our budget priorities moving forward.
We hope you'll take time to see all that Balancing Act has to offer. If you have questions for our finance team or feedback on how this tool could be more useful, please contact us. Thank you.
Thank you. So up next, if you have any questions currently in Facebook, it's my understanding there were some questions and we're going to get to them. I do just want to say for future, if you have questions regarding this presentation and you're watching this later on, you can submit those questions to publicbudgetwebinar@rcsdk12.org. And questions that are gathered through that email will be responded to and also published on our website. We do have a landing page for the budget. And so I am going to stop there and see if staff can ask a few questions.
So we do have a few questions. Good evening, everyone. We do have a few questions from our Facebook that we are going to start taking. Again, a reminder, you can now, the floor is now open for those who have questions. You may do so by visiting our Facebook Live or YouTube Live and submit your questions in the chat, and we are monitoring the chat for that. The first question is, where can we see a more detailed breakdown of COVID funding streams? This person is struggling to understand the headings in the pie chart that was shared. So where would persons in the public be able to see a more detailed breakdown of COVID funding streams?
I can take that question. We have an extensive website that outlines our ARP and CURSA documentation and information. So if you go to www.rcsdk12.org/ARP, you can find much more detailed information on that website link on our page.
Okay, thank you very much, Superintendent Mara Small. Another question, in the slide presented by the CFO, over 8% of the budget chart was set aside for debt servicing. This person believes it was more than 86 million. Would someone please explain what the debts are and the timeline for repayment?
Sorry about that. My mouse wasn't working. We would be happy to provide that information back in a formal log format, because obviously I don't have that all with me this evening, but there is an absolute debt schedule, and we can actually lay that all out for our participants. It's not a problem.
Thanks, CFO Pierce. As a reminder, we will be placing the responses for tonight, as well as any additional questions that come in, to the website, www.rcsdk12.org/budget. If you visit there, those will be posted to the webinar page. So please be sure to check that out if you have questions that you wanted more answers to. I'm not seeing any more questions coming in right now, so I want to give a little bit more time. I'm just going to go ahead and check our YouTube page once more. I have one person who believes that the participatory budgeting idea and the tool looks like it will be very useful and helpful to the public and for the parents to understand the budgetary process and for improving transparency. So if we could maybe talk more about that.
Yeah, I'll take this one. Participatory budgeting in the Rochester community is actually not a new concept, but it is new to the Rochester City School District. Personally, my goal is to also see City Council lay out a participatory budgeting process for the City Council budget, but we're not there yet. We're going to roll out ours. But in the past, you may have noticed that some of the projects that were community-based at one point, some of our foundations and even the anti-poverty initiative had did some participatory budgeting with some of the community projects where the community got an opportunity to come in and actually vote and give some ideas of how some of these projects could be funded. So it's a similar concept, but on a larger scale. The Syracuse City School District actually is one of the first participatory budgeting districts in the state of New York to use the tool, same company and the city council in Syracuse. But it is meant as an opportunity in real time with an actual live budget. So we won't be using this budget that's being developed right now for the 22-23 school year, but the goal is for the 23-24 school year to have the tool align with the budget so that in real time we can gather input and feedback from our students, our staff, our community members about how RCSD should be spending their dollars. And it allows it to, when you give input, to also see where money would else come from. Again, like if we're pulling from one pot, we would have to pull from another in order to fund it. So I do think that we will get there. We're not quite there, but I do want to state that the goal is going to be to offer some hands-on and training, and both virtual training, in-person training. The tool can be downloaded on any tablet or cell phone or laptop. So it is very web user friendly, if you will, and see how we can partner with like libraries and so forth, so that people have an opportunity to interact with the tool even beyond the school scope of it. So that's where I'm at. And I'll leave it there for now, but there's going to be lots of opportunities to, again, educate our community about the tool and how to interact with it.
Thank you, Vice President LeBron. I also have additional questions that have been submitted through our web form. Again, we will share that email address once more. So feel free to also send those. This question was submitted. What is going to be done to make our spending sustainable in the longer term, considering that short-term boosts in funding may not be something we can depend on in the future?
Dr. Myers-Small, do you want to take that? Or would you like me to take that?
I can start, and then certainly if I miss on anything, please fill in. So part of what we have to continue to look at, and we've had conversations about this, is that there are some main areas that we have to be much more diligent on. One certainly is reducing our district footprint. And due to our declining enrollment, we have a process that we will be engaging in with the board and with the community to look at our footprint, and that will occur over the next several months with making finalized decisions in late September or early October. Additionally, we do have to look at our staffing and to ensure that staffing aligns with the number of scholars that we have in each grade and each school program, et cetera. And as we continue to share, again, our enrollment is declining. And then also just looking at not only our contracts that we have with vendors to see where we can have efficiencies in that regard. CFO Pierce, if there's anything else that you'd like to add, that's fine.
Yes, I would. We have been challenged by the Commissioner of Education, and rightfully so, that we need to rethink the way that we operate within school districts in New York State. And part of that is to look for additional revenue sources. We need to be creative. What do we have that we can offer others so that we can increase our revenue? We also need to be very proactive in competing with the charter schools on an academic level. And how are we going to market ourselves in the effort to do so? What are we going to do to regain and to bring back our children who have left to go to charter schools? So those are two key areas that we will need to continue to focus in on, in addition to the items that the superintendent has mentioned.
Thank you, CFO Pierce and Superintendent Meyer Small. I will take another question from the web form and then I'll bounce back to Facebook and YouTube. Another question is, why is it that the RCSD does not allow the taxpayers and community members to vote on the budget like surrounding districts? This new budget book has little to no details in comparison to the former year's budget books. How can the BOE properly vote on a budget, and how can the community have transparency on where the money is going with a lack of details?
I'm gonna start, and then Carleen, if you want to jump in, because so I don't know which budget book they're referring to, but we have not been given as a Board of Education a budget book yet. So there is no way for us to know what is in the current budget book until we actually see what draft is being presented to us. So I know that I can speak for myself as an individual commissioner, I would not be comfortable voting on a budget that lacked details. So I just want to be clear about that. The second piece, though, has to do with the way that the state is set up in terms of the big fives. So the big five school districts, because of the way our funding is set up as well, we do rely heavily on the state to support us and sustain us. And so the way that the big fives are set up, the Board of Education vote on the budget. In the surrounding county areas, and Carleen, you can jump in and give actual language to this. This is just my general assessment of it. They do have the ability to levy their tax and increase their tax base as of voting if they want to. And we do not. The city levies our taxes. We as the city of Rochester and the school district don't have the authority or the ability to levy taxes. So I will turn that over to you, Carleen, and you can explain it a little bit more in depth too.
I think you always do such a great job, Vice President LeBron. One of the items that has been mentioned many years is over the course of budget development is the fact that our MOE, our maintenance, if you will, with the city has remained at a constant level of $119.1 million. And again, that level has stayed the same for the last 17 years. That is the money that we receive from the city. And that is derived in part from taxes that the city is actually collecting and then passing back over to the school district. So Vice President LeBron is absolutely correct. We are not in a position where we can levy taxes, nor are we in a position where we can say we need more money from the city to support our instructional needs. So again, that's just a matter of how the big five operate. We are, if you will, a child of the parent being the city, and we are a child or a subsidiary, I can't say that right, subsidiary of the parent, which that is the city of Rochester itself. The other portion of the question with regard to the budget book, again, this is a brand new format for this year. The intention here is to listen to our public, to respond to them, because in years past, they have let us know this book doesn't mean anything. There's too much information. It's too confusing. It's not being transparent. I can't understand what you're saying. And so what we tried to do was pull out those areas that we felt to be most relevant to our public from what they've shared with us. And we are focusing in on those areas to say, how can we deliver a document, a tool for the public in a manner that is highly transparent, as well as absolutely filled and based upon integrity. And I need to also state that this is part two, if you will, of a 3-year process. We made some changes last year, as you may recall, And again, listening to the public, this is year 2 or phase 2 of that effort. And we will be going into a phase 3 next year, where we will be reaching out at a greater level, going out into the buildings, to solicit our staff, our students, and again, our community, to say, how can we do a better job in delivering this to you? Executive Director Hassler has spent a considerable amount of time with his team in looking at the budget documents from other Big 5 districts, as well as other districts, even nationally, that we've pulled information in to say, what are the best practices out there? We do believe that the community will see a significant change this year, but hopefully that they will be greatly satisfied in the efforts that we're taking to develop a tool or a document that will aid you in understanding the budget as we move forward. Nothing is being removed from the deliberation sessions. Questions will continue to come in from the commissioners as well as the public, as we've done in the past. So please know that we do not want to withhold information. Our intention, again, is to continue to be more transparent, actually.
Thank you, CFO Pierce and Vice President LeBron. I'm going to bounce back to our YouTube. We have several questions on participatory budgeting here and also on Facebook. How do keeping schools open or closing schools impact the budget for next year? And will deciding which schools to close and not close be part of the participatory budgeting process?
I think I could take the second part of that, and Dr. Myers-Small, if you want to take the first part of it. Again, my goal is that participatory budgeting is the norm for the school district. I do think that it will give, because we cannot vote as citizens on our budget, that it at least allows the citizens and our staff and our students to have a say in a different way than they have historically in the Rochester City School District on how we spend and utilize our dollars. And yes, when there are tough decisions that need to be made, other districts that use participatory budgeting use the tool in this way as well, to say, we have some tough decisions to make. We need to save, and I'm just going to throw an arbitrary number out there, $5 million. You know, here are the areas that we can pull $5 million and allow the community to have some input and say on what that looks like. So I would imagine that as we move forward and tough decisions need to be made, that we allow it in a way to give options and have the community have a say in those tough decisions, but then also use the tool to collect input in real time on perhaps some alternatives that we couldn't think of. And there are those moments where the community has come up with some suggestions and ideas that we just didn't have the foresight at that very moment to work through. And I very much so see this as a collaborative tool with the community. Dr. Myers?
Thank you, Vice President LeBron. So when we look at closing schools, reorganizing, merging schools, we've shared publicly that right now we have, the way our schools are configured, we can educate about 30,000 students, but our enrollment currently sits at about 23,000 students. So we have 7,000 open seats across the district. If we merged or closed some schools, we could better maximize using our resources within the district. We also know that we have vacancies, right? So if we merged and closed schools, we would be able to reduce that particular vacancy gap because we would have our students and our schools merged together. But really, it's about, one, the district's footprint, right? So we wouldn't be using the building, so that's utilities and things of that nature. And it also does involve staffing.
Thank you. I will take another question from Facebook. As a reminder for folks who are watching, you are able to submit your questions via Facebook Live, as well as or YouTube Live at this time, as well as our online web form. And I do have 2 more questions from our web form as well that I will say next. But from our Facebook, will the participatory budgeting process allow for specific program suggestions In the video, it appeared to only include broad categories of spending. So if someone can speak on that.
I'll start, and then I see our CFO is on here, who has been instrumental in helping us, her and her team, figure this piece out. It is a very large transition and a huge lift. So I do want to thank our CFO and her team for really leading this work and putting in the effort into a brand new process, again, of what has been done historically in this district. So we're all on this learning curve with this tool, as well as our community will be, and other commissioners as well, and even our own staff. So yes, the goal is that it is going to be greater detail, but again, as we are on this learning curve, if you will, of managing and learning the tool, the goal was to load it with the current budget that's in there now and do some very broad categories. But as we move forward, if there are specific areas that the community wants to identify, like, yes, I would want to see programs over going into, you know, the operationals piece. And I'm just throwing, again, just general topics out there, but that is something that we can adapt this tool to, if that is what is the will of the community. If we hear that from our community, like, yes, we want to see greater details and programs and have a say in the programs that are in RCSD and what that looks like. Ms. Pierce, would you like to add anything as well?
I would, thank you. Within the tool itself, I think that one of the most valuable takeaways will be exactly how little there is that can be maneuvered within the budget. So much of what we are faced with, as you saw in the expenditure chart, has to do with our union contracts, our benefits, and realizing the portion that takes up within the budget that we are obligated to pay. It's an expenditure that we are obligated to pay. What the tool is going to show is what is within our control and what is not within our control on an annual basis, so to speak. So also what you're going to see too is that there's going to be questions that we are posing to you. We would like your opinion on those areas that we can change. And your input as a community, as board members, whomever chooses to use the tool, we would very much like to hear from you what you think about how we can better operate business within the district and the ideas that you have. So please do answer the questions. And again, we are welcoming other questions to come in as time progresses on. What you feel to be most relevant, we certainly can add questions to the tool. But again, it will allow us to drive down what your thoughts are on revenue opportunities and areas, as Vice President LeBron has said, where we need to change with what we can change within our expenditure side. So appreciate folks tapping into it and trying it out this year to see how you like it and what we can learn from you.
Thank you, CFO Pierce. As a reminder to those in the public who are particularly interested in the participatory budgetary process, you may learn more, and actually the tool is now live on our website. So if you are interested in, you know, going in and looking around and seeing for yourself what this is all about, you can visit us at www.rcsdk12.org/budget once more, and everything is there, the video that was shared tonight. So you can navigate that on your own time as well if you would like the opportunity to do so, as the tool is now live. Additionally, on that website, you will be able to see our budget dates, as well as any documents that will be kept or linked throughout the entire budget season. So please, we welcome you to go ahead. Our pages are live with regard to the budget. I have two more questions from our web form. How do you determine what areas you would like to spend on, and how are you receiving feedback, and are you receiving feedback?
So as I shared during the portion of my presentation, we have a strategic plan that guides all of our actions in the district. So there are priorities, there are targets, and there are benchmarks. So that undergirds every single thing that we do. But additionally, we have an academic plan, we have a fiscal plan, and we also have what are called corrective action plans specifically for the areas of special education, bilingual education, and then we also, it's not a plan, but we have a consent decree which we have to respond to and then put action plans in place. So in order to move all of those aforementioned either plans or decrees forward, we have to take a look at our budget and how might we address the fact that we say, for example, I shared that we want to improve the performance of our scholars in grades 3 through 8 in New York State math and ELA or English language arts. So how do we look at our budget to figure out what we might do, whether it's assessment tools, professional development, et cetera, to address that is a target or a benchmark that we have. In our academic and our fiscal plans, we have recommendations that have been agreed upon between the state monitor, our Board of Education, and the administration. And so those are things that we must fulfill and address and have to become a regular part of what we do in the district. And so that guides our work as well.
Thank you. Our last question, and I again want to remind folks that you may ask questions on Facebook Live and YouTube Live at this time, as well as our web form. But the last question that I do have is, have you budgeted money to screen all kindergartners for dyslexia at this time?
I'll have to, that's a question that either Dr. Black, our Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, or Desiree, who oversees special education. And if not, we can respond to that very specific question.
Good evening. I can respond, Superintendent. And
Thank
so
you.
kindergarten screening is a part of the kindergarten process. So our staff is already there for that. We screen for readiness and some of our hearing, speech, vision. And so there is not specific funds called out to screen for dyslexia, but we do a kindergarten screening for all incoming kindergartners who were not in our pre-K programs.
Thank you, Dr. Black. And so that does conclude the questions that I do have submitted on our Facebook Live or YouTube, as well as our web chat forms. I'm going to bring up on the screen once more the email that folks would be able to take advantage of after our event. Public budget webinar at rcsdk12.org. If you visit that website, that email, you can submit any additional questions you may have regarding the budgetary process. And that is being followed by our teams, and we will post those to the website, rcsdk12.org/budget. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Vice President LeBron.
Thank you, Kalia. So at this moment, I just want to take a quick opportunity to thank our CFO and the finance team, our communications team, especially to Mercedes and to you, Kalia, our board clerk, who folks don't always get to see the folks working hard behind the scenes to make all of this happen, but it does take a lot of work and effort from all of these teams and to the superintendent and your team as well, so that we can come together and have these public budget webinars, if you will. Again, these are intended for educational purposes and putting information out there before the official budget deliberations happen, so that you have a better understanding of what's happening. And I know for myself coming into this, I didn't know what was happening and I didn't have an overview. We were just kind of thrown into it. And my goal is that every community member can follow along and understand what's happening. We'll get there, hopefully. But with that, I do want to turn it over to our president to do an official closing for us today. So President Elliott, I'm going to turn it over to you. Before I do, I just want to thank the other Board of Education commissioners who are all here as well. And you may or may not have seen them, but Commissioner Malloy is here, Commissioner Adams is here. So welcome back again to Commissioner Adams, Commissioner Simmons, Commissioner Patterson, and Commissioner Powell. All are on the screen and you may or may not see them, but I do get to see them on my end. So do want to thank them for being here as well. President Elliott, with that, I give you the official closing. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Vice President LeBron, for your leadership on our budget, and thank you, Dr. Myers-Small, for the work that you and your team, including CFO Carlin Pierce, have done, and all of the team. And I'd just like to say that, you know, when we're doing the last few years, the budget process has been difficult, because we recognize that we have a structural deficit that we have got to address. And so having said that, there's some difficult decisions that will have to be made, even in terms of our negotiating with our collective bargaining units, in terms of staff reductions, in terms of closing buildings. There is just some difficult decisions that we're going to have to make. We can make those decisions knowing that we have done the best that we can for our children and for our families, given the climate that we're in. And so I'd like to also leave you with the fact that we have some great news in our graduation rates. If you recall in the media, the overall graduation rate was 71%. While our Gen Ed students, the graduation rate was 77%. And then we had, and then with the Asian Island Pacific students, it was 83%. The areas that we need to improve in are ELL and special education. And so that's going to be my focus, that if we can uplift those groups, then our overall graduation rate will continue to increase. So as we move through the budget, my questions are going to be, you know, how are we going to address financially the needs of our ELL and our students with special disability needs, because that's going to lift the boat up. And so with that, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the questions. They were some very well thought out questions, which says to us that our community is listening. And just to have this particular venue in order to host our community, just thank you again, Commissioner LeBron and Dr. Leslie, Dr. Smalls for this. And so with that, I will thank everybody again. I don't know if somebody else has something else that they have to say.
I just want to thank the state also for being here,
Yes.
because the community doesn't get to see them, but we do have Dr.
Right.
Gio Martino here, Schwartz, and Dr. Young Wilkins, and also Dr. Jallo. Thank you for participating and being more involved in this than you're even obligated to. So thank you. I really appreciate you jumping in and being a part of the team. Thank you.
Yes, we thank you, because we want to make sure that we are on track and we're correct in our approach. And so having you to participate with us helps us to keep on track with what we need to do for the Rochester City School District. Thank you.
Vice President LeBron, you can't thank yourself. So we want to thank you for being our finance chair. And we really do appreciate you push us to think about the ways that we are operating as a district, the way that we're using our funds. You ask us, sometimes you push us and you ask us good questions. So we thank you, because what is very clear is that you have a passionate advocacy and concern for our scholars and our staff. So we would be remiss if we didn't thank you for your work as well. And you can't, it would be self-aggrandizing if you thanked yourself.
And
it would be a little weird. It would be a little weird.
So thank you.
I don't think you all heard me. She's brilliant. So let me just make sure that's clear.
Thank you, President Elliott. I appreciate you as well and your leadership. And lastly, we're gonna end our Love Fest with thanking the community. Again, whether you're watching this live or going back to watch it, I know lots of folks in the community who do watch our board meetings and our committee meetings and even our work sessions, perhaps not always live, but they do come back to our videos. So if you're watching this later and you didn't catch that email, I will just say that you can always email any member of the Rochester City School Board with any questions that you have. And with that, I want to thank everybody again. Have a good night and welcome to the budget of 22-23 year, because we're kicking it off. Thank you.